Good morning. It's Tuesday, October 13th, and it's a beautiful day to combine some beans. A lucky day to combine some beans, you might say. I was out earlier, took Dad over to get the truck, and he took it to town, and got the combine fueled up. Apparently the fuel gauge is pretty accurate because I put 106 gallons, 107 gallons in, 140 gallon tank, and it was reading about a quarter tank or a little less, I think, on the gauge, so we weren't too close to running out. That's good. Need to get the combine blown off. I'm due for another 50-hour grease, which some of that was road time, so I don't know. It seems like you should go off separator hours, but the monitor thing in the cab comes on at engine hours, so we'll give it some grease. I did at least plan ahead and get the separator or the cylinder sped up and move the rear tires where I can get to the zerks on the spindles, because those are on the 50-hour grease, and once that's on, it's the same casting on both sides, so the zerk hiding under the blob of grease there with some soybean dust mixed in is on the back on this side and the front on that side, so it works better if you turn the wheels a little bit, because then you can get the grease gun tip in there. Otherwise, I guess there was no dew last night, so that means that A, we can run probably now or pretty soon at least once I get everything organized here, and B, the soybeans are going to be getting more over dry by the second, basically. So we're going to try to basically run as hard as we can today, I guess. Hopefully nothing breaks, or if it does break, hopefully there's dew tomorrow, and then we can combine some with a couple points higher moisture maybe. But hopefully, as long as things go relatively smoothly, we should finish up with soybeans tomorrow, which is exciting because that means I potentially have 1 or 2 times that I need to blow the combine off from soybean dust again, and that's thumbs up from Steve. Alright, let's get busy. Before I gear up to blow the combine off, I was also going to say I apologize for not getting more footage at the end of the day yesterday. I ended up accidentally, or inadvertently we'll say, filling up the memory card on the camera and didn't really have time to mess with trying to delete off or edit out important parts of the footage to get some more video, because I was a one-man band and trying to scramble to get stuff full and get the truck to town before the elevator closed. Ended up in a line for a while, got back after dark, blah blah blah. Anyway, hopefully today will be good because I got the camera memory card totally empty, so we've got hours of space to get good footage. Well, story of my life, everything took longer than I hoped. I'm on the way to the field. It's about 10:45. Should be running by 11, but not as early a start as I would have liked to get today, but gotta grease things or they break. I also replaced a half dozen of the sections down on the sickle, so the little triangle knife things that move back and forth in between the guards. It seemed like I had a little bit of trouble yesterday with leaving some shaggy spots in certain areas, and not really any rhyme or reason that I could tell. Some of those guards might be worn a little bit, but as dry as everything is, it should be cut and clean. So I replaced about a half dozen of those triangle knife pieces, the sickle sections. And I also noticed one that I put in upside down. So this is a Schumacher cutter bar, so the sections are alternated, so you're cutting on both the top and bottom of the guards. And apparently when I was doing preseason stuff, or I assume preseason, put one in wrong. Not the end of the world, but I went ahead and switched that back also. And like I said, replaced about a half dozen that looked a little bit questionable. Nothing really looked bad, but hopefully we've got sharp edges everywhere and we can cut clean and roll fast. That's the goal at least. We're a few passes in, gonna get out and make sure things are working the way we want. Also got a red-tailed hawk hanging out here, looking for mice running out of the soybeans, I think. Looked like he might have got something a minute ago. At least he swooped down and was clawing around at the ground. So I really don't think we have any issues, other than we're on pretty good dirt and the yield monitor doesn't seem to be saying they're yielding very well, which they don't really look great. They're kind of short compared to where we've had good beans. Not sure I'm a big fan of this variety, to be honest, but we're gonna kind of look things over and make sure we're not losing anything out the back or knocking out too much with the head. If I was losing enough to matter, I think I would be able to see it from the cab, to be honest, but So we'll be splitting a few, or I mean, if all we're losing is there's one tiny soybean that may have probably got knocked out by the reel, I would guess. I mean, this looks good. I think we're cutting a lot cleaner. We are leaving a little bit here and there. The stems are still quite tough, even though the beans are under 10% on the monitor, which means they're probably 9 something. I mean, low 9s, I would guess, at the elevator. Pods are crispy, stems are tough. That one's crispy. I don't know. Strange that it got missed. But I'm not seeing much on the ground anywhere. I mean, one here or there, but you're always going to lose a little bit. So basically, there's nothing on the ground. It doesn't really matter what everything else looks like because we know we're not losing anything, right? Let's see if there's some stems on the walkers we can take a look at. Looks like we're getting everything knocked out as far as I can tell. For some reason, there's random stems that are tough. Like the one that had the soybean stuck in it up there was super wet. Everything else around it dry and crispy. Don't know. Could be slight variances in the genetics, that certain beans were alive longer. I haven't really seen any green ones in this variety. Dust in the eyes. Just a thing, I guess. Soybeans are weird sometimes. I think some of the video that I took when I was making the second pass on soybeans, or third pass technically, second post pass, I made the comment that I never know if I'm spraying too much or too little to come back with that second post. Didn't seem like there was anything there when I sprayed, but there is some water hemp where I didn't. So clearly I was doing some good. Whether or not that was enough to pay for the chemical and time and effort and fuel and everything else, not sure. There is some water hemp, there's not a lot of water hemp. Would like it to be clean, but to some extent, at this point, we're always going to have water hemp because there's enough of it around and enough that's gone to seed in the past that we have to be pretty aggressive with the chemical programs anyway. So as long as it's not thick enough that it's taking away a lot of nutrients from the soybeans, it's probably not that big of a deal. I mean, I don't think it's probably hurting me yield-wise at this density. I would prefer not to have the weed seeds for next year, but usually we don't have too much trouble in corn, and hopefully being no-till, some insects will have a nice lunch over the winter. The good news is that since it continues to not rain and there's no rain in the forecast, we're on pace to be done with harvest way early this year, which has been pretty crazy for the last month because I don't know when the last day I had off was. It has rained a little bit here and there, but basically those days I've ended up working 12-hour plus days on DJ stuff. So I'm getting to where I could use a day off, but on the other hand, if it doesn't rain, we might be done with harvest in a week. Probably should be done with soybeans tomorrow, and we put a pretty good dent in corn earlier, and a lot of what's left is going straight into bins. So we could be easily done with harvest 2 or 3 weeks ahead of what we have been the last couple years, it seems, if the forecast doesn't change. I don't love taking out beans under 10% because that's costing us yield and that we're not selling the water that we should be able to. But we sort of rolled the dice on trying to catch this rain Sunday night and missed that one, so there's no rain in the forecast at this point for any forecast that I've seen, and you run the risk. I mean, they'll just get drier at this point until it rains or we get some heavy dews, and you run the risk of, you know, if things are really dry, heavy rain can knock a lot of beans out of the pods or get freak hail or something like that. As you can see, I've got beans kind of sticking up behind the reel here, so always an adventure. Things are moving forward. I'll be able to sleep eventually, and then I'll miss my time in the combine, I guess. Our red-tailed hawk friend is back. We're kind of getting down to the last little bit of this triangle patch. I think he just got something, probably a mouse. Turns out we actually have 2 red-tailed hawks hanging out now. One over here that maybe got something. At least it looked like he had something in his talons when he jumped up there, or she again. The other one hovering up here somewhere. To see what runs out of that last pass, I'm sure. I think he just got something too. Or again, I think that's the same one that got something on the last round. It's hard to get good footage with GoPro, especially looking through my dirty windshield. But it is pretty common to have red-tailed hawks, especially when you get down to the last few rounds or when you're doing tillage. They'll often follow you around and see what runs out of the dirt behind the tillage implement. See a pretty apparent stripe where that first pass was yesterday. I think maybe a lot of the problem with that was that there was some chaff that had blown back into the last pass that Dad ran Saturday. And then probably the way things looked, maybe got a little bit of a shower over here Sunday night, so that there was kind of some accumulated residue, plant residue with some moisture in it that caused problems, because it was mostly just the outside edge of that first pass and a little bit on the second pass, and then everything was pretty much fine after that. Hawks must have got full because they actually, I don't see them now that we're actually doing the last little bit here. That's the last of this field onto the truck. I have one farm, sort of 2 fields left. Neither of them are very big. 45 or 50 acres, somewhere in that range, I think, between the two. So moving forward, looks like basically no chance of dew tonight, so we're just gonna roll, I think. Probably some of them are gonna be drier than I want, but it is what it is. I'll leave you with a parting shot of the rapeseed cover crop, looking very green. I have a feeling that now that the beans are out of there, it's gonna grow really nice too. I'll try to come back and do an update after we finish up harvest, and potentially a few depending on when we get a hard freeze or kind of how things play out. Got another hawk hanging out watching us here. I haven't seen him catch anything, but I have seen some mice. Got a couple hawks patiently waiting here now. One there and one that's right behind the mirror out on that terrace. seen at least one of them catch a mouse in this field. Beans are running decent for the most part, although I'm kind of high on this side because I'm going over the top of the terrace right now, so I'm going to have to catch that on the way back. These are the 3.9 soybeans. It seemed like they did pretty well. This field has some really thin hillsides that were farmed for a long time without having any terraces. Just not very much topsoil left. They grow good foxtail, and that's about it. And those spots were not very good, but otherwise, some of the other spots that aren't great dirt, but aren't as terrible, have been doing, it seems, pretty decent. I may have given up some top end on the good half of this field, but maybe did a little better on the bad half. This is sort of my, we'll call it my Jekyll and Hyde field, I guess. So half of it was farmed for a long time, no terraces, just disc in the ditches in the spring, harrow it a couple times, plant it, do it again the next year. The other side was always pasture until about 10 years ago, and had the terraces put in before it started getting row cropped. So it has a lot more topsoil, a lot more organic matter in general. Usually about a 20% difference in yield on the good half of this field versus the bad half. I think it's 20%. It's significant. Because a 20% difference in yield is much larger than that difference in profit normally, because basically both halves get pretty similar treatment as far as seed and fertilizer and chemicals. Probably fertilize a little heavier on the side that has higher removal rates, or higher bushels removed, so higher nutrient removal, but not too much difference in production cost, and a pretty significant difference in the bushels that we usually take off. Might not be quite that much this year, but we'll just have to see how things come out when we start looking at scale tickets. Somehow, we have managed to lose a bolt that holds a guard onto the cutter bar. I think I probably have a bolt that will work with that. It's not a special one. This one was a long one, and it's all there, I think. Strange. I think we replaced that guard. I kind of wonder if those got tightened down all the way. Well, I managed to find enough pieces to get things reattached. Pretty sure we screwed up this guard. It's kind of cracking apart where it's welded together here on the edge. The other side seemed okay. Didn't really have the right bolts though. This one was missing, and I did have a bolt that was the right size for that. This one really should be longer, and I think there should be, it had a washer under the head here, and I think there were some washers between the tab and the guard before. Kind of chowdered up some of the sickle sections. We're gonna see how it looks. I didn't change any of those yet. I'm hoping that I can get by with it the way it is for today and change it tonight or tomorrow morning maybe. It's gonna need a little bit more attention because I really need a longer bolt here to get that locked down right. Let's see how it goes. Next on our wildlife safari, we have a ringneck pheasant. Just ran out over there, over the fence line, and into the cornfield. Got that field finished. I've got 18, 19, somewhere in that range, acres left on the other side of the ditch in the same farm. Just gonna wait till tomorrow to do it. It's about to get dark. I'm not gonna be able to see squat because those dust diverter fans aren't working because that bearing's out. Plus I also have to, since we don't have any of this corn out yet, I need to go out through the building site up there with the combine, which is a little bit tight with the trees and everything, and I'd rather not do that at dark and tear something up. But before we leave, I'm gonna crawl back up on top of this grain bin and look at the gravity spreader deal again and try to figure out a game plan of how I'm gonna fix that, because it sounds like I'm basically on my own. So here's what we're looking at. Either this has to drop down to the grain so that I can work on it inside the bin, or I gotta drag it out the top. My thought was that dropping it down inside might be easier because I don't know how much it weighs exactly, and once you get it out, you still have to try to deal with it up here, which is not going to be super safe. My hope was that it would be relatively easy to take this loose from this, and I could just pull a pin and drop it. And it feels like there's just a linch pin under there, but it seems to have bearings and lock collars on both the top and bottom, which, I mean, makes sense because you want that to spin smoothly. So the other option is that I could loosen these bolts and drop it down. The only problem is that this thing is tight against the rim. So that ain't gonna work. I'm gonna have to take these bolts loose and these bolts loose, slide that in, and then drop it down. Would have been a lot better if the people who were paid to assemble this, because they knew what they were doing and were supposedly experts, had done their job. What are you gonna do? It seems that the check already cleared, so the people that we bought it from might fix it, but basically said, you won't like our timeline. And then got pissy when I was a little bit, I don't want to say rude, not thankful of their lack of help. Because they also told me that there's a piece of metal that overlaps on this first rib that goes all the way down that connects together when you extend the chute out, contrary to what the directions that I found said. And no, sorry. So if they'd offered to send me the part that I need, I would have been a little less annoyed. But when you screw up and somebody calls up to try to get help and you tell them they are wrong, not exactly good customer service, because I'm pretty sure I wasn't wrong. But what are you gonna do?